The stars had vanished. They had been swallowed by an expanding darkness, one that seemed to stretch endlessly beyond comprehension. It had been years since the last flare of light shimmered across the sky. For many, this had been a death sentence. The end of civilization. The quiet darkness had claimed entire civilizations, from peaceful planets to war-torn empires. Yet humanity remained. Against all odds, they survived. Humanity had never been a species known for yielding. Even when faced with the infinite abyss, the human spirit refused to bow. It was a trait inherited from the very first days of the species, long before they ever set foot among the stars. A single thought persisted through their collective minds: survive. The initial phase of the darkness was the hardest. No one knew where it came from or why it swallowed the stars, and every attempt to understand it resulted in more questions than answers. Vast fleets, launched from the hearts of once great human colonies, ventured into the unknown regions of space. Some never returned. Others returned only to tell stories of colossal, incomprehensible structures that could alter the fabric of reality itself. Humanity's science was advanced, but it had never prepared them for this. The sheer magnitude of the blackened void, an infinite ocean with no shore, baffled even the greatest minds. Yet they adapted. They adapted as they always had, with relentless resolve. The first sign of human resistance to the void came not in a vast warship, but in a small, unassuming colony on the edge of a system that had once teemed with life. It was called Prometheus Station, located on a desolate moon that barely qualified as habitable. A hub for scientific research and exploration, it was largely forgotten when the void descended. But its inhabitants, a small crew of scientists and engineers, refused to let the silence take them. The colony's leader, Captain Maya Kessler, had known this would come. She had been among the first to notice the signs of the encroaching dark, a subtle distortion in the fabric of space that slowly intensified over time. Her warnings had been dismissed as paranoia by the higher-ups, but she pressed on regardless. When the darkness finally reached Prometheus Station, Kessler was ready. "We might be the last ones left," she told her team, "but we won't go down without a fight. If there's one thing humanity does best, it's surviving." Under her guidance, the small team began making preparations for the impossible. They repurposed every available resource, transforming Prometheus into an impenetrable fortress. The station's deep space telescopes, initially designed for scientific observation, were now repurposed for scanning the dark expanse. What they saw was chilling. The void was not just a lack of stars, it was something far more sinister. There were patterns to the darkness, structures hidden in the folds of the endless black, structures that hinted at an intelligence far beyond their own. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity did not falter. The human spirit was alive, thrumming with defiance. Maya's crew began building ships, not to flee, but to venture into the unknown. They didn't know what they would find, but they had to understand the void. They had to uncover the mystery behind the vast darkness, for the survival of all humanity depended on it. As Prometheus Station's ships launched into the void, a ripple of hope surged through the crew. Their journey was just beginning. They had no idea what dangers lurked ahead, but one thing was certain: they were not alone. Whatever force had brought the darkness was watching them, but they would not yield. Humanity's relentless spirit had awakened. The fight for survival was about to begin, and the crew of Prometheus Station would lead the charge into the unknown. The ships that emerged from Prometheus Station were small, sleek vessels designed for both exploration and defense. Each one was a testament to humanity's ingenuity, crafted from the best materials the station could provide. They had no weapons capable of matching the ominous structures lurking in the depths of the void, but they did have something more important: determination. Captain Maya Kessler stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Dauntless, her eyes fixed on the dark expanse ahead. The light from Prometheus Station faded behind them, swallowed by the abyss. What lay ahead was anyone's guess. "Helm, plot a course toward the coordinates," Maya ordered, her voice steady despite the growing uncertainty. "Aye, Captain," came the response from Lieutenant Theo Vargas, the ship's navigator. He worked the controls, and the ship's engines hummed with power as they cut through the void. In the quiet of space, even the smallest sounds felt amplified, and the silence was deafening. The rest of the crew remained silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was the only hope they had. "Captain," a voice interrupted Maya's contemplation. It was Dr. Lena Hughes, the station's lead scientist, and one of the few who had championed Maya's warnings before the void arrived. "We've detected something. A massive energy spike, not far from our location. I think it's coming from one of those structures." Maya's heart raced. "Could it be a weapon?" "I don't know," Dr. Hughes admitted. "But it's definitely artificial. And it's active." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. What could they be walking into? Were these structures left behind by an ancient civilization, or were they something far more sinister? "Prepare to engage at full power." "We don't know what we're dealing with," Maya said, her voice tight with resolve. "But we need to find out." They approached the source of the energy spike cautiously, keeping their distance. As they neared, the void seemed to ripple, and the darkness seemed to thicken. There was no light, only the faint glow of the ship's instrumentation. Suddenly, a colossal form emerged from the nothingness. It was vast, an intricate network of shifting, angular shapes that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The ship's scanners couldn't make sense of the readings. It was as if the structure existed outside the known laws of physics. The crew stared at it in awe, fear creeping into their minds. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. A living fortress, perhaps? A machine? Or something in between? Maya clenched her fists. "Prepare for anything. Shields up." The ship moved closer, and as they did, a voice, deep, ancient, and resonating, echoed through their communication systems. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, but a powerful, telepathic presence that seemed to reverberate within the minds of everyone aboard the Dauntless. "You have come, curious, brave, foolish." It was an alien voice, but not one of pure malice. There was something almost tired in its tone, as if the entity had been waiting for something for eons. Dr. Hughes' eyes widened. It's speaking to us. How is that possible?" "Quiet," Maya snapped. She knew better than to let fear or confusion cloud their judgment. They needed answers, and they needed them now. The telepathic voice continued, each word like a strike to the psyche. "You seek to understand, to survive, to conquer, but you do not know the price of such knowledge." Suddenly, the ship rocked violently as a shockwave of energy blasted out from the structure. The crew was thrown from their seats, but the ship's systems held steady, its reinforced hull protecting them from the worst of the blast. Maya scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. "Report." "Shields holding," Lieutenant Vargas confirmed, his voice strained. "But whatever that thing is, it's not friendly. We're being locked in." Before they could react, the immense structure began to shift, its surface fracturing like a giant puzzle coming apart. A rift in space itself opened, a portal glowing with unnatural energy. The crew had no time to brace themselves. The Dauntless was pulled toward the portal by an invisible force. "We're being dragged in," shouted Vargas. "Full power, now," Maya ordered, slamming her fist onto the command console. But the ship's engines screamed in protest, unable to fight the overwhelming gravitational pull of the portal. Then, as quickly as it had all started, the pull stopped. The Dauntless hung suspended in a vast, empty space, a space far colder and darker than anything they had ever known. The structure before them now looked even more monstrous, its true size revealed as they floated closer. It was a monument to something ancient, something alien, and they were its guests, whether they liked it or not. The telepathic voice boomed once more. "Welcome, survivors. You will learn what the darkness is. You will learn if you dare." Maya's hand hovered over the control panel, but her eyes were fixed on the immense structure before them. What had they just awakened? The silence that followed the telepathic message was suffocating. Maya Kessler stood frozen, eyes locked on the structure that loomed before them. The Dauntless drifted silently in space, its systems struggling to maintain their equilibrium. The crew remained tense, each member silently grappling with the enormity of what had just occurred. "Captain, what do we do?" Lieutenant Vargas asked, his voice barely a whisper. The tone of the voice they had encountered echoed in his mind, unsettling him in ways he couldn't quite describe. "We wait," Maya said, her voice steady. "We don't make any moves until we understand what's happening. Keep communications open with the other ships. We're not alone here." The other ships that had joined the expedition were also caught in the pull of the portal, but they were now scattered in a wide formation, each one hovering near the alien structure. The fleet had been dragged into this unfamiliar space, but they hadn't been attacked. Not yet. Dr. Lena Hughes was staring at the data streaming in from the ship's scanners. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain, these readings are impossible. The structure's energy output is fluctuating, as if it's alive. There's no sign of any conventional power sources, no reactors, no engines. It's as if the structure is the energy." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "So, we're dealing with something far beyond anything we've ever encountered." Hughes nodded slowly, her eyes wide with both awe and fear. "We could be in the presence of an entity older than the galaxy itself, Captain. It might not even be a thing in the way we understand. This could be something beyond the laws of physics, something fundamentally different." A new wave of silence followed, only interrupted by the occasional hum of the ship's systems. Maya gripped the armrests of her chair, steeling herself. They couldn't afford to let fear take control.
"Not now."
Then, as though the structure had sensed their hesitation, a ripple of energy surged from its core, lighting up the void with an eerie, pulsating glow. Maya's eyes widened as the ship's communication systems buzzed to life again. This time, the voice was not telepathic. It was mechanical, artificial, as though translated through some ancient technology. "You have entered the realm of the Forgotten Ones. The price of knowledge is steep. You'll be tested. Only those who prove worthy will unlock the truth of the void." Maya's mind raced. Tested? What kind of test? The voice did not answer directly. Instead, the surrounding space seemed to warp, and an immense force pulled at the Dauntless, pulling it closer to the core of the structure. The portal they had entered began to shift, revealing a landscape, a vast, barren wasteland that stretched beyond sight. There were no stars, no signs of life, only a void that seemed to contain echoes of long-dead civilizations. Maya's heart pounded as the ship descended toward the surface. "Brace for impact." The Dauntless hit the surface with a heavy jolt, but the ship's systems absorbed the shock, keeping the crew safe. As the dust settled, they emerged from the ship and stepped onto the cold, lifeless ground. The landscape around them was alien. Vast stretches of smooth, obsidian-like rock marred only by strange, geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint light. "Stay close," Maya ordered. The air was thin and dry, and the crew was vulnerable. They had no idea what dangers lurked on this forsaken world. Their only hope lay in finding answers, and quickly. They moved cautiously, following a path marked by faint, glowing symbols etched into the ground. The symbols seemed to guide them toward a structure in the distance, an ancient temple of sorts, its towering spires rising against the dark sky. As they approached, a voice, not telepathic but real, broke the silence. "You seek knowledge, humans. But to understand the void, you must first understand yourselves." Maya's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary trial. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "In this place, you will confront your own fears, your own desires, your own weaknesses. Only by overcoming these can you unlock the truth of the universe." A chill ran down Maya's spine. This was no simple test of intellect or strength. It was a test of character, of what made them human. It would push them to the brink, forcing them to confront the very essence of their being. "I don't care about the test," Maya muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "I just need to know what happened to the stars." The crew stood in front of the temple, its enormous doors slowly creaking open as if anticipating their arrival. Maya stepped forward, leading the way, with the others following closely behind. As they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them with a force that shook the ground. The room inside was vast, and its walls were lined with more of the strange symbols. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which sat an orb of pure, black energy, a dark, swirling mass that seemed to absorb all light around it. The voice spoke again, this time booming through the chamber. To unlock the truth of the void, you must offer a sacrifice. What will you give to see the stars again? What is the price of survival? The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The air was thick with tension, as each of them began to question what they were truly willing to sacrifice. Their lives? Their hopes? Their humanity itself? Maya stepped forward, her resolve hardening. I will pay any price, as long as it brings humanity one step closer to survival. The orb flickered, as if acknowledging her determination. The challenge had begun. The orb pulsed with a dark energy, sending waves of cold throughout the chamber. The air felt thick, oppressive, and every step Maya took seemed heavier than the last. The voice, the entity that controlled this forsaken place, echoed in their minds, relentless and unyielding. You seek the truth, but truth comes at a cost. You must prove yourselves worthy. Maya took a deep breath and turned to face her crew. They were all here, standing on the precipice of something unknown, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. This was no ordinary trial. It wasn't just a test of strength or intellect. It was something far deeper. They were being asked to confront their own fears, desires, and weaknesses. Stay focused, Maya said, her voice cutting through the tension. Whatever happens, we stay together. The pedestal with the dark orb in the center of the room began to shift. The walls of the chamber seemed to bend and warp, revealing multiple pathways that stretched into the unknown. Each path was marked by glowing symbols similar to the ones they had seen outside. The voice spoke again, and this time, it sounded almost amused. Choose your path. The trial begins when you step forward. But beware, the path you take will shape your fate, and it will test your greatest weakness. Maya felt her pulse quicken. The message was clear. This was no simple physical challenge. The structure before them, the very essence of the void, had the power to reach into their deepest, most vulnerable places. She could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on her chest. The paths lead in all directions, Dr. Hughes observed, her voice shaky. But we don't know where they end. Maya nodded. We don't have a choice. We must face whatever this place has in store for us. The crew moved forward hesitantly, choosing the paths that seemed most familiar. Maya, however, felt drawn to the one on the farthest side of the room. It was the least illuminated, shrouded in shadows. But there was something compelling about it, something that told her that this was the path she had to take. I'm going, Maya said, her voice firm. The crew watched her for a moment, but no one argued. They knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. One by one, they selected their own paths. But as they did, something changed. The air around them grew heavier, more oppressive, and they could feel the presence of the trials starting to close in on them. Maya stepped forward, the darkness enveloping her as she walked into the shadowed corridor. The walls closed in behind her, and the sounds of her crew's footsteps faded away. She was alone now. Suddenly, the space around her shifted. The world before her seemed to fracture like broken glass, and she found herself standing in a familiar place. Earth. The scene before her was haunting, and the memories it invoked were both painful and bittersweet. She stood in a place she hadn't seen in years, the old ruins of the city she once called home. A place that had long since been abandoned after the first wave of intergalactic wars. The devastation had been brutal, but it had been a world she fought to protect. But in the midst of the ruins stood a figure, a shadow. Her younger brother, Gabriel. Gabriel, Maya whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The figure turned slowly, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was him, her brother, the one she had lost to the war. The one who had been taken from her when the battles had torn their world apart. But this wasn't possible. He was gone. She had buried him with her own hands. Gabriel's eyes, once full of life and joy, were now empty. hollow. They seemed to pierce through her very soul. Why didn't you save me, Maya? Gabriel's voice was cold, accusatory. You were the one who led us into the war. You promised we would survive. You promised we would make it. Maya felt her chest tighten. She had never forgiven herself for the loss of her brother, for the choices she had made. She had been the one to send him into battle, and now his ghost haunted her. I couldn't save you, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I tried. I couldn't. I failed. Gabriel took a step forward, his eyes darkening. You failed. And you'll fail again. You cannot save everyone. You can't even save yourself. The words cut into Maya like a blade. She had failed her brother, failed her people, and now she was being forced to confront that failure. The memories, the guilt, the overwhelming sense of loss, everything she had buried deep inside her now surged to the surface. But there was something more now. She could feel it, a spark of defiance rising within her. She had made mistakes. She had failed, but she had survived. And she would continue to fight. No, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. I won't let this defeat me. I won't let it define me. Gabriel's figure began to fade, his form disintegrating into nothingness as the darkness of the trial pressed against her. The memory of her brother lingered, but Maya knew she had to let go. She had to move forward. The world around her shattered again, and suddenly, she was back in the chamber, standing before the dark orb. The walls had returned to their normal, eerie stillness. The voice of the entity resonated through the chamber once more. You have confronted your past. But this is only the beginning. Many more trials await you. The question is, are you willing to pay the price? Maya's heart still raced, but her resolve had hardened. She had faced her deepest fear. Now, she would face whatever else this place had in store for them. Let's move forward, she said, her voice unwavering. The orb's pulse seemed to grow stronger, as if acknowledging her determination. The trials were far from over, but Maya knew one thing for certain. She would face them all, and she would not back down. The eerie silence that followed Maya's trial was unsettling. As she stood before the dark orb, her heart pounding, her mind wrestled with the emotional weight of what she had just faced. The memories, the pain, each was still raw, but she had overcome it. Or so she thought. The voice, cold and distant, echoed through the chamber once more, this time with a subtle hint of something more, something darker. The path is not yet complete. Your test has only just begun. Maya's resolve tightened. She had made it through her trial, but the entity's cryptic words rang in her mind. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it head-on. The crew was counting on her, and humanity depended on their success. One by one, the other members of the crew began to emerge from their trials. Lieutenant Vargas was the first. His face was pale, his expression distant. He stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly as he took in the surroundings. You okay? Maya asked softly, knowing full well that none of them were truly okay, not after what they had experienced. Vargas nodded, though his eyes told a different story. It was difficult. I had to face a choice I made, a choice that destroyed my career. I thought I could live with it, but seeing it again, it hurt. Maya nodded in understanding. They had all faced their pasts. Whatever had occurred during their trials, they were now stronger for it. But the question remained. What did it all mean? Why were they being forced to relive their darkest moments? What was the true price of knowledge? We'll make it through this, Maya said, more to herself than to Vargas. She turned back toward the orb, which pulsed faintly in the center of the room. The entity had yet to speak again, but Maya could feel its presence, like a shadow hanging over them all. Dr. Hughes was the next to step out of her trial. Unlike Vargas, her face was not pale but flushed, as though she had come out of a battle. It made me question everything. My work, my faith in science. It showed me a world where everything I believed in was wrong. A place where knowledge, where my obsession with understanding led to disaster. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. None of us are perfect. But we're here. We're surviving. And that counts for something. Dr. Hughes nodded, but Maya could see the lingering doubt in her eyes. She had faced her own crisis, one that threatened to tear at the very foundation of who she was. But it was the trial's design, to break them down, to test the very essence of their beings. "I know, Captain," Dr. Hughes replied quietly. "But there's something else here. Something ancient. I can feel it, trying to whisper into my mind." Maya didn't respond. She, too, had felt the presence of the entity, an intelligence far beyond their own, manipulating the trials, pushing them to confront their worst fears. Whatever it was, it had an agenda. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber began to tremble. The orb, now brighter and more erratic, flared with energy. The ground shook beneath them, and Maya's stomach twisted with a sense of foreboding. The voice spoke again, its tone different this time, darker, colder. "You have shown strength, but that alone will not save you. You must understand that survival in the void requires more than courage. It requires sacrifice. Your minds are fragile. You must choose. Either face your greatest fear, or be consumed by the darkness." The words hit them like a wave, crashing against the fragile wall of their defenses. Maya's breath caught in her throat. They had already been tested, forced to relive their pasts. And now this. They were being told that their minds were fragile, that they might break under the pressure of what lay ahead. "What does it want from us?" Vargas muttered, his voice tight with fear. "It's not just testing us. It's breaking us." "I don't know," Maya replied, her voice grim. "But we're not backing down. We've come too far to stop now." As she spoke, the floor beneath them cracked open, revealing a descent into blackness. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. Something was pulling them downward, into the very heart of the trial. Without a word, the crew began to move, descending into the abyss. There was no choice but to go forward. They had come this far, turning back was no longer an option. The darkness enveloped them as they descended into the unknown, each step bringing them deeper into the mind-bending space. The walls of the cavern seemed to shift and warp, bending in ways that defied the laws of physics. Maya could feel her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. Nothing made sense anymore. The walls, the floor, the very air around them seemed to warp and distort as though reality itself was bending in on itself. Suddenly, the crew found themselves in a vast, open expanse. The ground was flat and featureless, stretching endlessly into the black void. There was no horizon, no sign of where they had come from, and no sign of where they were headed. It was as though they had stepped into a place outside of time and space. And in the distance, they saw it, a colossal figure standing alone in the center of the void. Its form was indistinct, shifting like a mirage. Its presence was both terrifying and alluring. The voice of the entity boomed once more, shaking the very air around them. "This is the final trial. To survive, you must confront what lies within. Only then can you unlock the truth of the void." Maya felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. The trial had taken on a new, more terrifying form. They were no longer just facing their fears. They were facing something far worse. The very essence of their being. The figure in the distance began to move toward them, its form flickering in and out of existence. The crew instinctively took a step back, but Maya stood firm. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice ringing out across the empty void. "What do you want from us?" The figure loomed closer, its form solidifying into something more recognizable, a monstrous, distorted version of herself. Maya's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just an illusion. This was her darkest self, the version of her she had fought to suppress. "I am you," the creature rasped, its voice hollow and mocking. "The part of you that is afraid. The part of you that doubts. The part of you that can never be good enough." Maya's blood ran cold. The creature's words struck deep, hitting her where it hurt the most. The doubt, the guilt, the fear of not being enough. All of it surged back to the surface. The trial had reached its most terrifying point. Maya had to face the version of herself she had never wanted to confront, the part of her that could break. But she refused to let it consume her. She had faced her past, faced the darkness outside, and now she would face the darkest part of herself. "No," Maya whispered, her voice steady. "I will not let you win." The creature roared in frustration as it lunged at her, but Maya stood her ground. She would not break. She would not give in. Not now. The battle had just begun. The monstrous version of Maya, a twisted reflection of her darkest self, towered before her, its distorted features contorting in an expression of raw, unrelenting malice. Its eyes burned with an almost tangible hatred, its voice a guttural mockery of her own. "I am the doubt you carry, the failure you refuse to acknowledge. You are nothing but the sum of your weaknesses." The creature's voice reverberated through the void, its tone both mocking and filled with venom. Maya's pulse raced, but her resolve was even stronger. The words struck deep. She had spent years carrying the weight of her choices, the lives lost, the guilt of leading humanity into the unknown, of never being able to save her brother, of feeling like an imposter in her own skin. It was a darkness she had buried under layers of duty and leadership. But now, here in this twisted reality, that darkness was staring her in the face. "No," Maya said again, louder this time, more forcefully. "You're not me. You're a lie. I'm not afraid of you anymore." The creature's twisted grin grew wider. It lunged at her with inhuman speed, its claws outstretched, but Maya stood her ground. In a flash, the ground beneath her feet cracked open, and a surge of energy coursed through her body. The trial wasn't just testing her, it was offering a way to transcend it, to break free from the shackles of her own fear. She held out her hand, and to her surprise, a brilliant light flared from her palm. It wasn't a weapon, not in the way she had expected. It was something deeper, a manifestation of everything she had come to accept about herself. The creature faltered as the light bathed it, its form flickering and distorting, torn apart by the very energy Maya had embraced. For the first time, she felt a true sense of power, not in the physical sense, but in the raw, unyielding certainty that she had conquered her inner demons. "You cannot defeat me with light," the creature hissed, regaining some of its form. "I am your weakness. I will never let you go." Maya's response was clear, and it came from the deepest part of her soul. "Then you'll never have me." The light intensified, growing brighter and more intense until it consumed the creature entirely. The twisted version of herself let out a horrific scream, but it was quickly silenced as the darkness began to recede, the trial's grip on her finally weakening. The figure shattered into nothingness, vanishing as if it had never existed at all. And then there was silence. Maya stood alone, the remnants of her trial fading away. She felt drained, but also liberated. The oppressive weight that had once hung over her heart had vanished. For the first time, she understood the true nature of the test. It wasn't about defeating an external enemy or unlocking ancient knowledge. It was about conquering herself, understanding her own fragility, and finding the strength to rise above it. But the ordeal was far from over. The ground trembled again, and Maya looked up, sensing that the true trial was now about to begin. "You have defeated your own darkness," the voice said, its tone now less menacing, more reflective. "But what of the others? What will you do when the price of survival becomes too great?" The walls of the chamber began to shift once more, revealing a new challenge. It was no longer just about Maya. The entire crew had yet to face their own trials. They had all walked the paths of doubt, fear, and weakness, but they had yet to unlock the power within themselves to transcend it. "Captain," Dr. Hughes said, stepping forward, her eyes burning with newfound determination. "We're ready. We know what we must do." Maya nodded, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. She had learned what it meant to sacrifice, not just for the crew, but for humanity as a whole. They were on the verge of something great, something beyond the scope of their understanding. The cost would be steep, but they could not afford to fail now. Vargas, too, stepped forward, his expression resolute. "We will face whatever comes. Together." Maya gave them a grim smile. They had faced their demons. Now, they would face the true price of survival. The chamber before them pulsed with a new energy, and the voice, now calm and almost sad, echoed through the void. You have passed your trials. But to understand the truth of the void, you must make the ultimate choice. To unlock the knowledge you seek, you must sacrifice something far greater than your pasts. You must sacrifice your future. Maya's heart froze. The cost of knowledge. The price of survival. The words resonated deep within her. She had already sacrificed so much. They all had. But this was something different. It wasn't just their lives at stake. It was their future, their hopes for the generations that would follow them. What do you mean? Maya demanded, her voice tight with fear. The voice grew quieter, almost sorrowful. To understand the void, to truly comprehend the knowledge hidden within it, you must let go of everything you hold dear. Your hopes, your dreams, your sense of self. Only then will the universe reveal its deepest secrets to you. Maya's breath hitched. The weight of those words crashed over her. They were being asked to give up everything they had worked for, everything they had fought to preserve. The knowledge of the universe was within reach, but it would come at a price that no one could fully comprehend. We don't have to do this, Vargas said, his voice shaky. We don't need to know everything. But Maya knew. She knew the universe would never reveal itself to those too afraid to accept its price. Humanity had come this far. They had survived against all odds, and now, they stood on the precipice of something far greater. They could not turn back now. We can't turn away, Maya said softly, her voice filled with the quiet strength of someone who had made a decision. Humanity's future depends on this. We will pay the price, whatever it is. The crew stood in solemn agreement, each of them facing the same question. How much were they willing to sacrifice to ensure the survival of humanity? As the orb before them pulsed with energy, Maya knew that their fates were sealed. The final trial was about to begin, and there would be no turning back. The silence in the chamber was deafening, heavy with the weight of the decision that lay before them. The dark orb pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of the void itself, as though it was waiting for their answer. The crew stood together, their expressions a mixture of determination and fear. They had come so far, overcome so much, but now they faced the ultimate cost. Maya stepped forward, her mind spinning with the implications of the entity's words. Sacrifice their future. Let go of everything they held dear. She turned to face her crew, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. We don't know what awaits us, but I believe we have the strength to face it. Humanity is stronger than the sum of our fears. We've proven that already. Dr. Hughes nodded, her eyes brimming with an intensity that matched Maya's. If we don't do this, we may never understand the true scope of what's out there. We'll be blind forever. But if we accept it, if we accept the cost, then we may be able to shape a future, one based on knowledge instead of fear. Vargas, though still shaken by his own trial, stepped up beside them. I'm with you, Captain. I've already lost so much. I'm ready to pay whatever price it takes to make sure humanity doesn't fall into the darkness again. The collective resolve was unspoken but clear. They were ready to sacrifice. They had come too far to back down now. The future, their future, was worth any cost, no matter how terrifying. Maya took a deep breath, her heart thumping in her chest. We're ready, she declared. The voice of the entity reverberated once more through the chamber, its tone shifting from cold and distant to something almost mournful. You have made your choice. The price of knowledge is steep, and you must offer what you hold most dear. The future you seek will not come without a price. Let go of your past, of your dreams, and embrace the void. The air around them crackled with energy. Maya's pulse quickened as the room began to distort, warping like an image out of focus. The walls shimmered and vanished, replaced by an endless expanse of stars and galaxies swirling in the blackness. Suddenly, the orb flared with a blinding light, and the entire chamber collapsed in on itself. The The crew was lifted off their feet, their bodies being pulled into the void itself. Maya could feel her very essence being torn apart and reassembled, as though the fabric of her being was being unraveled. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the infinite darkness around them. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the sensation ceased. Maya opened her eyes, blinking against the intense light now surrounding them. It wasn't a room anymore. It was a vast, cosmic expanse, an infinite space filled with swirling galaxies, nebulae, and untold constellations. They were no longer bound by gravity or the constraints of time and space. They were floating in the void itself, untethered and free, yet somehow more connected than ever before. The entity's voice echoed in the vastness, calm, but still resonating with immense power. You have crossed the threshold. The price you paid was your connection to the past, to the dreams you once held. The future now lies before you, unwritten, infinite. But know this, what you seek is no longer the same. It is no longer just knowledge but wisdom, the understanding of what lies beyond the limits of your perception. Maya glanced at her crew. They were all here, suspended in the void, their bodies no longer bound by earthly limitations. They were the first of their kind to step into this unknown realm. There was no going back. "We've lost something," Maya whispered. The words were heavy, a painful truth that echoed in the back of her mind. "We've sacrificed our connection to everything that made us human." Dr. Hughes's voice was steady as she replied, "Perhaps. But maybe what we've gained is more than we can imagine. What's ahead? It's not just the knowledge of the universe. It's the wisdom to know how to use it." The vastness before them seemed to pulse with life, as if it had been waiting for them all along. New paths materialized, stretching into the unknown. Each path shimmered with promise and danger alike, the weight of their choices now entirely on their shoulders. As they moved forward, their bodies felt lighter, their minds clearer. They had transcended their own limitations, but at the cost of the very things they had once held sacred. They had become something more, something beyond human understanding. The voice spoke again, its tone now softer, almost maternal. "You are the first to cross into this realm, and you are the first to bear the knowledge of the void. But know this, your journey is far from over. You have entered the realm of the infinite. The universe will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. The cost of survival is the sacrifice of self. The price of knowledge is the loss of identity. You must choose what you will become." Maya looked out at the endless expanse before them. The paths ahead were infinite, but they would never be the same. They would never be just explorers again. They had become part of the void itself, and the universe was theirs to shape. But with that power came the realization that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. "What will we become?" Vargas asked quietly, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. Maya didn't answer immediately. She was still processing the enormity of what had just happened. The sacrifice, the knowledge, the future. It all seemed so vast, so unfathomable. But one thing was clear, humanity had survived. And in doing so, they had unlocked something far greater than they could have ever imagined. "We will become whatever the universe needs us to be," Maya said, her voice calm but resolute. "We will guide the future, and we will shape it with the wisdom we've gained. No matter the cost, no matter the price." As the crew moved forward into the vast, uncharted expanse, the final realization settled in their hearts. They had paid the ultimate price, but they had emerged stronger, transformed into something beyond humanity. They had become the architects of the future, and the universe, no matter how infinite, no matter how vast, was now theirs to explore, to understand, and to protect.